No, but that's what it is. Everybody's in charge of a department they want to get rid of.
Right.
You know, the head of the EPA doesn't believe in global warming. Maybe I'll go back to it, but you know, I have a podcast, I have a television show. I'm not retiring, and I don't know where this started about I'm getting rid of real time. Trump wants to get rid of the EPA and replace the environment with something terrific. So I don't know, about Donald Trump. I don't know what else to say about the guy. But, of course, he will provide us with a lot of new material, and I'll get into it. But I was hoping that in the episodic...
Did you know comedy might be Trump's biggest weakness? When Bill Maher described Melania as forever frozen in that mysterious blend of disinterest and contractual obligation, he wasn't just making a joke. He was exposing a truth that makes Trump absolutely furious. Trump can handle being called corrupt or dishonest, but being the butt of a joke? That sends him into a tailspin. That's why Maher's recent roast session wasn't just funny, it was strategic comedy warfare that got under Trump's skin in a way nothing else can. And the fallout even more hilarious than the jokes themselves. Before we move on, I'd like to ask you a small favor. If you appreciate this content, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Over 98% of you watch the videos without subscribing. It costs you nothing, but it makes a huge difference to us. So, did you click the subscribe button? Great, thank you so much. Now, back to the video. Ever wonder why Trump is more irate than when he loses an election? The fact that it's being ridiculed has been transformed into an art form by Bill Maher on his show Real Time.
Well, the biggest story really probably while we were off for these 5 months was Trump being put on trial, or he's got 4 trials. He's got I gave hush money to a porn star trial. Otherwise, I have new rules and monologue as a place in the show every week to talk about invading Greenland and annexing Canada and other stuff that's perfect for comedy, but I'm not going to take it seriously. I asked for 11,000 votes trial, and I tried to overthrow the government trial. So I just want to say, even if you're a fan, that's a lot of trial. Yeah, and I felt I had standing to make that case because I had for so many years been the only person I know on television who was consistently railing against ageism.
Maher did more than simply crack a few jokes at Trump. He gave a masterclass on how to totally destroy a man's ego while making the entire audience laugh uncontrollably. Maher began innocuously enough with what appeared to be a typical comedic segment on relationship advice. The audience was laughing along without thinking that the Trumps would be the primary victims of a comic chainsaw massacre. Maher steadily increased the heat as the bit went on. What began as lighthearted banter about famous couples abruptly and precisely focused on the former first couple. Maher's statement that Melania hopes to inspire little girls everywhere to marry for money caused the audience to gasp and yell. It broke through the phony grins and prepared interviews the Trumps have mastered over the years. However, when Maher characterized Melania's recurrent nightmare as being pinned beneath a giant orangey sack, Grumpy Trumpy's already wounded ego took a serious damage. Not only was the imagery amusing, but it also confirmed what many Americans had long believed about the transactional nature of the Trump marriage, and the studio crowd virtually fell out of their seats. Maher's ability to incorporate awkward realities into his jokes is what makes his comedy so devastating, not just the punchline. Maher wasn't merely making light of the former president's insistence that his marriage is flawless in spite of the innumerable instances in which Melania has been seen on tape batting his hand away. He was displaying a mirror of the surreal show that the Trumps have been putting on for the past few years.
The chances are very good that he will get convicted of one of these. We thought as a public service, because we're always about the public service here, we would put out a little pamphlet called Tips for Donald Trump's Cellmate. It's the last allowable prejudice that we can have in this country. You can always do the age jokes. You can always rail on people for being too old. And it was, as I said, a case-by-case basis. You were like taking people to task, as I think you should, for who like would boycott Donald Trump, and you said, but if he wanted to come on your show, you would have him on.
Of course.
Because you said it's important to talk to important people. Yeah, it's possible. Do I think he's going to start arresting comedians? I don't, but it's possible. Look, anything's possible with this guy. I'll put it this way. when George Bush was in the White House, it never even entered my mind.
Because they include those awkward realities that everyone suspects but polite society doesn't talk about publicly, the jokes have a unique impact. Maher wasn't just making things up when he made a joke about Melania's prenuptial discussions. Rather, he was responding to actual reports about their relationship. Trump and his supporters were therefore unable to dismiss it with a joke. Comedy is far more dangerous than a political attack when it reveals the emperor's new attire. If your opponent accuses you of being corrupt, you can defend yourself, but how can you defend yourself when millions of people are mocking you? A punchline is Trump's ultimate kryptonite, which is odd for a man who says he is impervious to controversies, legal action, and even criminal accusations. But when comedians aim, it's as thin as rice paper. Trump's comedy allergy file includes the 2011 White House Correspondents' Dinner as Exhibit A. Cameras captured Trump sitting motionless as everyone around him chuckled as Obama mocked him that evening. Trump chose to go into hiding thereafter, tending to his injured ego in private rather than laughing along like a regular person. Imagine campaigning for president because a comedian offended you. Some political analysts even think this humiliation served as the impetus for his entire presidential campaign. Nothing has changed, as evidenced by Trump's response to Maher's current comedic assault. When confronted with incisive remarks, the former president could only manage to refer to Maher as a low IQ individual. That's all. "I know you are, but what am I?" was the intellectual equivalent of the man who was known for nicknaming his adversaries. Imagine showing up to a knife fight with a spoon, but like a nasty rash, Trump's comedy allergy has swept through the MAGA community. Trump supporter Laura Loomer attempted to sue Maher for $150 million when her joking about her possibly marrying Trump went viral.
Never entered my mind that I couldn't say whatever I wanted to say without repercussions. And that's one of the great things about living in America. And we take America for granted and that kind of stuff, and maybe we can't anymore. Now he's the President of the United States, so if you're gonna have him on, this is everybody, hold his feet to the fire.
You mean literally?
Oh, if you could, would that be? We'll see, but am I gonna let it affect what I do? No. I mean, the day I feel like I can't say what I want without going to Guantanamo Bay, I'll just leave. What kind of guy is he? That's the point. We don't know. He's completely unpredictable. It took me 8 years to get Obama. He could appear on my second show. You don't know what this guy is doing, which is why...
Saying the jokes were harmful in some way. Legal professionals essentially said, LOL, good luck with that. There's no better way to demonstrate that we're not a bunch of snowflakes than to threaten $9 million lawsuits over joke. When Trump was forced to vent his frustrations on Truth Social rather than Twitter, his meltdown became even more depressing. It's like shouting in Times Square and then whispering in a Wendy's that is deserted. His criticism of Maher was heard by a far smaller audience, which added to the sense of desperation and loneliness in his response. This thin-skinned approach reveals Trump's brand's ultimate contradiction. He portrays himself as the strongest man in the world, capable of enduring any adversity, but when a comic delivers a joke, he breaks down entirely. It exposes what may be his biggest flaw, a weak ego that comedy penetrates more deeply than any political assault could. The problem with comedy with Trump is that it may be the weapon we've been lacking all along. While prosecutors, the FBI, and Congress have been busy constructing charges, comedians like Maher have been subtly destroying the Trump narrative with laughter, which is far more lethal. A surprising observation has been made by political analysts. Comedy is actually the death knell for authoritarians. A prominent person's carefully crafted image of strength begins to fall apart when millions of people laugh at them. In addition to being humorous, Maher's routine was subversive in the most potent way imaginable. Perhaps we've been making a big error in recent years by analyzing Trump's actions with political rigor when we ought to have been pointing fingers and laughing the entire time. The one thing that the orange man's ego cannot endure is being made fun of, yet he can weather investigations and controversies. It turns out that being ridiculed is Trump's greatest fear, not going to jail. And it's possible that's how his house of cards will ultimately collapse.